very, very grateful for this opportunity to be with all of you today. My special gratitude to Rita Nethersall, the Assistant Dean, Patrick Day, the Vice Chancellor, and Fatima, the Office of Student Affairs, and to all of you who have so kindly extended your precious time to be with us this evening. I was asked to speak on the subject of yoga and relationships and finding connections. I'd like to begin by sharing a remembrance of what I learned from one yogi in the Himalayan mountains about 40 years ago. At that time, I had just turned 20 years old after hitchhiking from London to the Himalayas, seeking meaning and fulfillment, what I believe everyone is looking for in various ways within this world. Although being brought up in the United States of America, where there was much prosperity, at the same time in the 1960s, there was much confusion and serious questions in the minds of the youth. I came to my own conclusion that if we do not have something very deeply meaningful that we're striving for in life, if we don't have an ideal we're willing to die for, we have nothing really very fulfilling to live for. So in so many ways, I was trying to find that through social exploration, through revolution, through counterculture. And eventually I came to the conclusion that even the greatest people that I deeply respected on all levels, the foundation in which they were trying to change the world was from a spiritual ideal. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and so many others. There was a spiritual basis that they were trying to share with the world. They weren't trying to take something. They were trying to give what they have found in themselves. Gandhi said we should be the change we want to see in the world. I was looking for that. I started looking for it in various isms, in various philosophies, in traveling to various countries. I came to the conclusion I have to find it in myself, or I'm not really going to find it anywhere else. So there I was, just out of my teens, alone without money, looking for that ideal in the jungles of the Himalayas. I had just sat on a rock for 1 month on the bank of the Ganges, meditating, praying. And as I went higher and higher into the Himalayas and the jungle, I met one yogi. His name was Kailash Baba. He was a very gigantic man, at least compared to me. I'm 5'6". I weigh about 125 pounds, and I weighed that much when I was 20 years old too. But he was probably 6'5", and he was a mountain of a man living in the mountains. He was around 65 or 70 years old. He left his home when he was about 15 to live as a hermit, wandering in the jungles, seeking the divine. In those 50 years, he never shaved, he never cut his hair or combed it. So he had long hair, and it was only in about 4 or 5 big strands that it was so long that he would be tripping over it. So just in order to walk, he had to wrap it in a huge, like a beehive on top of his head and tie it. And he had a kind of a wool one-piece of clothes that went from his neck to his feet. And he carried a trident, a 3-pronged iron spear, and had a big drum at the end of it. He was really into this drum. It was part of his meditation. And when I met him, he became like a father to me. He saw me wandering alone. I think he felt sorry for me. Actually, the way we first met was in a place called Dev-Prayag, a very holy place in the Himalayas, where 2 rivers meet, the Alaknanda and the Bhagirat. And where they meet, officially, it's called the Ganges. Now, I climbed down a mountain to bathe in this holy confluence of 2 rivers, and it was very early in the morning, still dark, because that's what yogis are supposed to do. Maybe not in Boston, but in the Himalayas. To wake up really early in the morning and take a bath first thing. And it was about February, so it was pretty cold. In fact, it was extremely cold. And I climbed down this mountain, and I could hardly see. I went into the river. The current was so fast. I didn't realize that everyone who bathes there has to hold on to chains while they're bathing. Otherwise, they die because the current's so fast. It just slips you away, and you go under the water after some time. No human being could possibly swim against that current, or even with that current. So I didn't know about these chains. So I started flying down the river. All of a sudden, I felt this hand, which was like a vice grip, grab my arm and lift me right out. One hand, lift me right out of the water. And then he took me with the other hand and put me on the bank of the river. That's how I met Kailash Baba. And then he started chanting these Sanskrit mantras to protect me. And I guess he realized I really needed somebody to take care of me. So he took me, and we traveled around, the 2 of us. I learned a lot from him. He taught me relationships on the basis of yoga. And the way he taught me, it was a matter of survival. Sometimes when you go to college, you take some courses, You get some really nice information, and then you think, someday I'm going to apply this to my life. Yes? But in the setting that I was in, it had to be applied at that moment if you want to survive. He was explaining to me how to live with your neighbors. Now, I know in Boston, we might live in the city, like in a suburb, inner city, I don't know, but you have neighbors. And how to live with them. And how to live with the people in your same house. Your husband, your wife, your children, your parents, your grandparents. In India, your great-grandparents, everybody's in the same house sometimes. Well, in the jungle, first of all, I had to live with him. Second of all, we had no houses. We were sleeping in caves or riverbanks or under trees. And there was every now and then, not every now and then, there was always, every now and then we would see them. There was leopards, wild elephants, panthers, a lot of cobras, vipers, various other color snakes, scorpions, plenty of monkeys, and mosquitoes. Kailash Baba taught me, if you have any ego where you think that you're better than them, they are going to kill you. He said, you have to see a relationship with them. You have to honor them, respect them, and give them their space. You honor and respect them with humility, and they will honor and respect you. If you fear them, they will kill you. Now, this was a crash course, because they were right there. There were no bars. He told me, you are a guest in their house. This is their jungle. They've been here forever. And then he explained to me, in his own way, how you could actually do that. You have to understand the sacredness of life. Wherever there is life, there is a spark of divinity. There is a part of God. And that spark of life is who we are. And that spark of life is who they are. And if we understand that we are all from the same origin, aham bija pratapita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that I am this father and mother of all living beings. And in so many of the great spiritual paths, we find that we all have a common origin, Ishvara, the divine, or God, who has many names. And if we recognize that godliness, that spark of life which is so sacred and so precious and divine, as the source within ourselves and in the source within others, then we actually understand we're brothers and sisters. We can honor each other and respect each other. So I started looking at these cobras slithering by a few feet away. My brother, I honor you from a distance, but I honor you. He told me you have to keep a distance from them. If you come too close, that's not honoring them, because you have to honor them. Honor the leopard by understanding he's more powerful than you. That little spark of God has a body that can rip you to pieces. And that little spark of God in the cobra has a body that can bite you and kill you in a moment. So respect them, honor them, but don't fear them. This was a beautiful lesson. And then when we came into villages, he taught me something that was even more difficult. Would you like to know? How to have that same type of respect and honor for other humans. Because humans are much more unpredictable than leopards or panthers or cobras or even monkeys. And he taught, now you are a penniless wanderer. You should learn how to beg with dignity and integrity as an offering to the divine. I learned a lot from Kailash Baba about how to actually perceive deeper and deeper relationships with all other living beings, all other children of God, by recognizing and respecting them and appreciating the sacredness of life. One interesting thing is Kailash Baba did not speak a word of English. And I did not speak any Hindi, his language. He taught me more than I learned in all my years in school without language. I learned something else about relationship. That if we really care about someone, if we really seriously want to help them, then there's a divine power beyond our own that enables us to really help. And when I think back of all the teachers I did have when I was in school, the ones that I remember the most, that made the biggest impact in my life, were those who really seriously cared about me and wanted me to learn. It was a form of love. Yes, because Kailash Baba cared about me so much and he really wanted to help me. So much knowledge came through him. And it was all through the way he pointed his fingers. Or he spoke a language I didn't understand, but his intonations, his raising of his eyebrow, his gestures, his picking up a plant. He taught me which herbs, roots, and fruits you can eat and which you shouldn't eat. Just this morning, I was walking with some of my dear friends, and we came upon a tree where there was some really nice-looking little fruits. And we picked one, and the person turned to me and said, "Can we eat these?" I said, I know some of them in the Himalayas, but I don't know the ones in Boston. I don't know. You might get sick or you might get healthy. Now, the difference is, here in Boston, we had a lot of other stuff to eat. But in the Himalayas, that's all there is. Yes. Relationship with nature, relationship with God, relationship with other living beings, and relationship with ourselves. Because there was affection. He was empowered by affection. And I was empowered because I really deeply wanted to learn. Yoga and relationships. The beginning of the path of yoga is to understand the relationship between the body, the mind, and the living force within us. Yoga means to reconnect, to reunite. And yoga really is about relationship. To reconnect, reunite with what? With who? That we'll try to explain briefly. So the Bhagavad Gita, which is a great yogic scripture, and Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they focus on the first question of life. Who am I? This is the fundamental basic class of yoga. Who am I? We have a body, we have a mind, and we are the living force within this body and mind. We're seeing through the eyes, hearing through the ears, tasting through the tongue, feeling through the flesh, thinking through the brain, loving through the heart. But who is that I? There are people who are blind, who are just as much alive as us. So that means we're not eyes. There are people who are deaf. That means we're not ears. According to the great saints and the great yogic scriptures, we are the Atma, the everlasting, eternal, living force, the soul. Living within the mind and the body. The body's always changing. Dehinosmin yatha dehe komarom yovanam jada. At one time we're little embryos, then we become babies, then children, then adolescents, then youth, and some of us become old. We all become old, but some of us are old. And eventually we have to die. It's inevitable. Death is as natural as the setting of the sun at the end of the day. Why is it that we're so much afraid or traumatized by death? And why is that common to almost everyone? It's because we are this eternal, everlasting soul. But when we identify ourselves with the mind, which is always changing, according to certain research, the average human being has 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The mind function is accepting and rejecting, thinking, feeling, and willing. We could be having the most happy day, and then just one little piece of news comes, or we step on a thorn, and all of a sudden our mind is tormented. One day we want to embrace someone, one day we want to beat them. The next moment. It's the nature of the mind. It's always changing. The body's changing. But who is that witness? Who am I? The Gita explains, because the soul is eternal, it's unnatural to identify with death. Because there's no such thing as death. But there's an element called ego, ahankar, which causes the eternal soul to think, I am this mind and I am this body, rather than I have this mind and I have this body. As Rita so beautifully said in her wonderful little talk before this lecture of mine, she said, we are not humans seeking a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And understanding that principle puts the whole perspective of life into a new light. So what is the relationship of the body, the mind, and the soul? Yoga has various ways of harmonizing the three. Asanas, physical postures, pranayam, breath control, jnana, cultivation of knowledge, dhyan, meditation. These are all ways of harmonizing the body, the mind, with our own true spiritual essence, our origin, the soul. And when we do that, then the next step is to understand what is the soul's relationship with our origin. An example is this. We're driving in a car, and there's different types of cars. I came here today in a Honda. On the highway driving, there was Chevrolets, and there was Fords, and there was BMWs, and there was Volkswagens, and there was some old, kind of, what do they call, extinct species or endangered species like Pontiacs. Now, I can go from one car to another car. The driver's the same. So the car and the mind are like a vehicle, but we're the driver. And what is the need of the driver? The need of the car is gasoline and oil. But if we try to drink gasoline and oil, are we going to be satisfied? We have another need. So yoga is to give the body what it needs, because the body is sacred. From the perspective of yoga, everything is inherently sacred if we see it in the right perspective. Because this human body especially is a vehicle that can be utilized to take us to the most enlightened state, liberated state of pure divine love, to realize our eternity. The only nourishment that could satisfy the heart is love. Food, sensual pleasures, wealth, and prestige can satisfy the mind and the body, but only love could satisfy the heart. During my journey, when I was visiting the ghettos of Calcutta, I lived with Mother Teresa for some time. And I remember she told me something I quote often because it's so universally essential. The greatest need in the world is to solve the greatest problem. And that problem is hunger. Not hunger of the stomach, hunger of the heart. She told me that she travels the world. She has been to London, New York, Los Angeles, Boston, Sydney, Bombay. And she said, in the rich, in the poor, in the powerful, in the weak, she sees the same hunger. People are starving for love. And the origin of that need for love is the soul's relationship with the divine. In the Yoga Sutras, Ishvara, the supreme controller. In the Gita, Krishna. In other scriptures, God, Allah. That one supreme being who is our ultimate origin, who is supremely sweet, who is supremely beautiful, who is supremely compassionate. We have natural tendency to love God. Savai pungshang paro dharmo yato bhaktiradhokshache. It is described in the yoga scriptures that our living force is a part of God, just like a sun ray is part of the sun planet. Qualitatively the same, but quantitatively a small part. Therefore, the highest expression of love is to serve without selfishness. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajja Kabunoi Sravanadi Sudititi Koriya Yudoi. That love of God and love for every living being is inherent within every living heart. It simply has to be awakened. And interestingly, the word religion comes from the Latin word religio, which means to bind back. Yoga and religion mean the same thing, to reconnect with our relationship with our true self, with God, and through that, with nature. Today there's so many environmental problems, and we can try to deal with them in so many ways. But the fundamental root of the problem is relationship. If you have boils on your body, you can deal with the symptom by putting salve, lubrication, or some sort of compress on it. But if the cause of it is a disease in the blood, then how many boils you cure, there's going to be another and another and another. So what is the root cause? We can clean all our rivers and clean all our oceans and clean all our sky and all the earth, but if we don't clean our hearts, we're just going to make a mess again. Pollution in the ecology of the human heart is the root cause of our environmental crisis today. The path of yoga teaches us our relationship with nature. According to the Vedas, Mother Earth, Mother Nature is a feminine aspect of the divine. And like a mother, she is providing everything for all of us at all times. What is the love of a mother? None of us would be alive without the love of a mother. A little baby is totally helpless for protection, for food. The mother nourishes us in so many ways. And similarly, Mother Nature gives us the breath that we breathe, the rain that brings water to drink, the grains and the vegetables and the fruits that we eat, the sunlight that keeps us alive. We're totally dependent on nature. And interestingly, our bodies are made of the same substance as the world around us. It's a mixture of earth and water and fire and air. Yes? That's what our bodies are made out of. Can't we see the interconnection? From the perspective of yoga, ecological thinking and lifestyle is not a matter of just leaving the world a better place than we came. It's a matter of a sacred relationship with the divine, of honoring, respecting the gifts that we're giving and the source from whom the gifts are coming from. There is that famous statement that is said to have been spoken by Chief Seattle when he saw people from Europe coming here and really just taking from the earth without proper consciousness of replenishing her. So what you're doing should be understood in this way. If you pollute and defile the bed that you sleep in, you are going to have to sleep in all that stuff. There's a golden rule for ecological economics that what we take from Mother Earth, from nature, we should be responsible to put back in a good way. Because what we give back to the earth after we take, what we give back is eventually what we're going to get in return. And that's what's happening today. We're taking wonderful food, wonderful water, wonderful air. We're taking so many beautiful things, and what are we giving back? Oftentimes, toxic waste. I saw a statistic for every truckload of food we take from the earth, we give back several truckloads of toxic waste. And eventually, what are we going to get back? That. Mahatma Gandhi said that Mother Earth can provide everything for everyone's needs. But Mother Earth cannot provide for even a few people's greed. There's a famous saying, you can never get enough of what you don't really want. And my beloved guru, Srila Prabhupada, he said, the way the world is going today is we're constantly creating within our minds the sense of unnecessary necessities. The problem is relationship. We have a relationship with nature. We have a relationship with every tree, with every plant. We have a relationship with the air, with the sea, with the water, with the rivers, with the earth. What is the relationship? We're completely dependent. And to reciprocate with honor and respect is a human virtue. And yoga teaches the next stage, relationships with each other. There's a beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani kavihastini suni chaiva swapakecha pandita samadarshana. Real knowledge, a really learned person or pundit, what is their quality? The Gita, the yoga scriptures don't say that real knowledge is about storing massive quantities of data in our brain. Real knowledge is developing real character, to live with integrity. And this particular verse, Vidyavanaya Sampane, describes what spiritual integrity is. To see every living being with equal vision. Whether one is male or female, whether one's color of skin is black or white or red or yellow or brown, whether one is rich or poor, from the east or the west, whether one is from one religion, another religion, or no religion, whether one is a human or an elephant or a cow or a dog, to understand that sacredness of life, that part of God that is within us all. When we realize, when we experience who we really are in our own relationship with the divine, we spontaneously, naturally learn to love every living being. And this is the first commandment of the Bible. To love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. If you love God, you can only love your neighbor as yourself, and you see that everyone is your neighbor. Relationship. Real universal sisterhood and brotherhood can be to some extent established on the basis of the oneness of humanity. But in order for it to have real substance, what is it that we really do have completely in common that can never be changed? That is the spiritual essence within us. We are forever related. It's only due to the ego that we forget who we are. We forget the relationship of our own body, mind, and our soul. And therefore we forget our own relationship with God. We forget our own relationship with nature. And we forget our own relationship with each other. In a household, in a family, if we focus our connections on a higher principle, then we will have the strength and the power to overcome the difficulties that come between us. And they will come inevitably. Real love in this world is not just about the sensation of the euphoria of romance, because that comes and it goes. I have seen in my 60 years in this world, people looking at each other in the eyes and seeing the stars and the moon and the heavens. And a few years later, they're looking at each other's eyes across from the judge's bench in a divorce court. And they're not seeing the heavens. They're seeing something very different. Real love has to be earned. I remember when I was a child, I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. My mother was putting cosmetics on her eyelashes. And I was sitting on her bed watching her as she was in front of the mirror. It's like yesterday, although it was over 50 years ago. And she said to me, "Everyone loves your father, and everyone loves me, but we do not love each other anymore. We have decided to separate." When I heard that, it was like the whole world just disappeared from under me. I felt so disoriented. It was like my heart was being cut in two. I was so confused. I started to cry. My mother looked at me crying, and she couldn't say a word, and I couldn't say a word. And I ran outside. Some hours later, my father came home. And I knew that my mother was going to discuss the subject of my reaction with him. So when he came into his bedroom, they closed the door together, and I secretly, don't tell him I did this, but I put my ear against the door because I was really interested in what they were going to talk about. And I heard them speaking to each other, and my mother said, "I told little Richie what happened, and this is what happened." He cried. And I heard them both say, "For the sake of our children, we are going to stay together, no matter what." Now, what I saw over the years is one of the deepest relationships I've found in this world. Over the years, they really learned to deeply love, honor, and respect each other. It was earned. And what was it that they did to earn it? They put a higher principle between them than just the problems itself. It is a fact. We can overcome many obstacles if we focus on the higher principle. In their case, the higher principle was their children. They worked everything out somehow or other. Now, if we take this same analogy and bring it to a spiritual platform, a purely spiritual platform, the higher principle is that we all have relationships, that every living being is a part of God. To forgive is necessary for any relationship to survive. Nelson Mandela said that trying to seek revenge on someone is compared to drinking poison yourself with the idea that it's going to kill the other person. Now, what does that mean? Because holding on to that vengeance kills your own inner conscience. My dear friend Bhakti Tirtha Swami used to say that if you are angry at somebody and you pick up a hot coal to throw it at them, you're the one that gets burnt first. But how do we rise above these angers and these envies and these arrogance and all of these other passions? How do we actually clean the ecology of our heart, of selfishness? That's the actual purpose of yoga. That's the purpose of religion. My beloved Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, he would say that real spirituality is not about being a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or a Jain or a Sikh or a Zoroastrian or anything else. It's about cleansing our heart. It's about awakening the dormant love of God that is within us and being instruments of that compassion in our life, in whatever we may do. I remember one time I was giving a class, something like this, in a university in Bombay. Now, I warn you, if you give a class at a university in Bombay, be careful about asking for questions. This particular university was for training people to be certified and chartered accountants. There was about 300 accounting students and teachers in this auditorium. And I gave a lecture. I was standing at a podium, and I asked, "Is there any questions?" One young man in the middle of the big crowd raised his hand, and I called on him, and he stood up. And I understood what I was in for when I saw the crowd's reaction to his standing up. Everyone went, "Ooh." And he really stood up with his head tall. He was a big guy. And I could see that he was really known for being a charismatic leader of this college. He shook his fist at me and said, "Swami, I reject everything that you have said. Whatever you have spoken today is totally useless. In fact, you are misleading everyone. You are cheating us. What if everyone in the world became a Swami like you? Who would grow the food? Who would do the trading and the banking? Who would do the government? Who would raise the children? Therefore, whatever you said is simply misleading, and we reject it." He said it with such force and conviction that all the students in the entire auditorium stood to their feet and gave him a standing ovation. I had to wait about a minute till the uproar calmed down, and then they all looked at me for my response. I hope you all have some sympathy for me by this time. I was thinking, I don't need this, I'm just trying to help. I'm not making any money for this. Anyways, I replied, I said, "What if everyone in the world became an accountant like you? Who would do the farming? Who would rule the governments? Who would do the training? Who would do the banking? In fact, if everyone in the world became an accountant like you, everyone in the entire planet would be unemployed because no one would need an accountant." And I said, there's a need for farmers to grow food, and there's a need for bankers to do their financial duties, and there is a need for governments to rule to make sure everything is in order. And there is a need for mothers and fathers and teachers, and there's a need for accountants, and there's even need for swamis. We all have our functions, we all have our duties to perform. Just like the human body. There are different parts of the body that have their own special features. The hand cannot do what the eyes do. The ears cannot do what the feet do. The brain cannot do what the kidneys do. Every part of the body has its own particular function according to the nature of that part of the body, but they're all working together for the whole body. It's not that the hand is saying, I'm higher than you, feet. You're lower than me. No, they're working together. So similarly, there's so many different types of occupations, there's so many different types of people. Yoga is to harmonize them all so that we're all serving each other. We all need each other. We're all connected to each other. To love God and to be a compassionate instrument of that love, that higher principle in the yogic school is what harmonizes all of us together. Now, I'm shy to admit this to you, but I got a longer and louder standing ovation than he did. And the best part of it is after I said that, he was still standing up. He went like this and smiled and sat down. Unity in diversity. There is so much diversity in this world, diversity of religions, diversity of races, diversity of nations, diversity of people's talents and attributes. To be able to actually appreciate the unity that we all have, that is the yoga of life. That is real spirituality. Gurbani ji, my very dear, dear, loving friend, he likes me to tell a particular story. When I was living on the bank of the Ganges in the state of Bihar in India, I had a friend. His name was Narayan Prasad. He was a Hindu, devotee of Ram. And I remember we would have such beautiful talks together. And every day, if I remember right, it was 11 o'clock in the morning, he would take me to his best friend's place. It was the Magadha X-ray Clinic. I still have it in my address book. And his friend's name was Mohammed. He was a Muslim. And each day, the two of them would discuss. Narayan would speak from the Bhagavad Gita and the Hindu scriptures. Muhammad would speak from the Holy Quran, with Islamic teachings. And they welcomed me to speak all the different kind of stuff I learned. And interesting, it wasn't like we were just trying to tolerate each other for the sake of unity. There was appreciation. There was love. They were really interested in what the other person was saying, and their faith and their teachings. And one day I was sitting alone with Narayan, the Hindu, and I asked him a question. I said, how is it in a country where there is so much communal conflict between Hindus and Muslims that you, a Hindu, is best friends with a Muslim? I'll never forget his answer. He said, if a dog has a master, and the dog loves his master. The dog will recognize the master any way the master dresses. Sometimes he will wear a tuxedo. Sometimes he'll wear a t-shirt and jeans. Sometimes he'll just be in underpants. Sometimes he'll be naked. The dog recognizes the master in any dress. And similarly, when our master, God, appears before other people at other times, in different dresses, with different names, if we cannot love him there, if we cannot recognize him, then we have so much we could learn from the dog. We are so much less than the dog. A real yogi is called Saragrahi, one who seeks the essence. Human nature sometimes is we become so obsessed with external rituals, ways of explanation, different types of traditions of times, that we don't really dive into the real essence. If we find the essence within our own yoga or spiritual path, we'll see that essence as the foundation of all great spiritual paths. If we see the essence within ourself, the sanctity within our own life, we will see that essence within every living being and within nature herself. When I was living in a place called Vrindavan, there was an old man named Ganasham. And he just loved to serve others. I remember one night, it was really cold and it was in the winter, and I used to sleep on the riverbank every night, and I came to see him and I said goodbye. He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to sleep." He said, "Where do you sleep?" I said, "On the riverbank." He said, "No, tonight it's so cold, you stay here." I said, No, I sleep on riverbank every night." He said, "But tonight it's too cold, you stay here." I said, "All right." Now, he just lived on the floor. He slept on the floor in a hallway of somebody else's house. He had a little temple in a closet where he did his worship. And he had one old blanket. And he gave it to me. I said, "Where's your blanket?" He said, "No need, no need." I said, "This is your blanket." He said, No, it's not my blanket. It's your blanket." I said, "Well, show me your blanket." He said, "No need, no need." I said, "I'm not going to use your blanket. You're 75 years old. I'm 20 years old. I'm not going to take your blanket. It's cold." He said, "No need, no need." I said that I'm going back to the riverbank, and I started walking out. And he said, "Okay, I'll take the blanket." So he laid on the floor, I laid on the floor, and he put the blanket over him. And now from yogis, I learned different ways of keeping warm in the cold. One is when you're laying on a riverbank or in a cave or on the floor, and you use your arm as your pillow and the sky is your blanket. One way to keep warm is you curl up as tight as you can, your body. You curl, and that gives a little heat to keep you a little warm. So I did that, but it was really cold that night. And I kind of dozed off. And a few minutes later, I kind of woke up, and I felt warm. I was wondering, what's going on? Why am I so warm? Then I looked over at Ganasham, who was laying next to me, and there was no blanket on him. He was trembling like a leaf in a windstorm. And then I looked and I saw the blanket was on me. As soon as I fell asleep, he put the blanket on me. So I took that blanket, and very quietly, very secretly, I tried to put it on him, but as soon as I touched him, he jumped up and said, "No need, no need." I said, Ganesham, this is your blanket. He said, no need, it is not my blanket, it is your blanket. And we started arguing. I said, then I'm leaving. And then he said, all right, I will take it. So he put the blanket on him, I curled up. A few minutes later, I woke up. I was warm. And I looked over, and there was old Ganesham, and as soon as I touched him with the blanket, no need, this blanket must be for you. You must be warm. I said, Ganesham, no, I'm not going to take this blanket. He says, please take this blanket. And he would say, you are Krishna, you are God's friend. And the only joy in my life is to serve those who God loves. God loves everyone. And the only joy in my life is just to serve those who God loves. He was so serious. He was in tears. He didn't mind the cold. He was in ecstasy. I remember there was an old song when I was a little boy that I used to love to listen to. And one of the verses was, the Jordan River is chilly and cold. It chills the body but warms the soul. Accepting inconveniences for a higher purpose, for an unselfish purpose of helping others, serving God and serving others, is the greatest joy. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was a married man with 10 children, a saintly wife named Bhagavati, and he worked in the British court system in India when it was under the rule of the Raj. But yet, even swamis and saints would come to hear from him and get his blessings because he was such a saintly person. And he used to say, the difficulties I endure to show compassion to other living beings, and in doing so to show my love for God, to express, are the greatest joys of my life. Yes, we are all connected forever. It's only the ego, this false illusion, this ignorance that disconnects us. And real yoga is to rise above the ego. And then what comes out of our hearts is the highest, purest, and most satisfying of all virtues, compassion. One of my friends was once on a balcony with my guru, Srila Prabhupada, and he was looking down, and there was a garbage heap, a big vessel of garbage. Now, there's garbage in America, and there's a garbage heap in India. It's quite a graphic scene, a garbage heap in India. And there was all these little boys scuffling through the garbage, looking for something to eat. And there was a pack of wild dogs, starving dogs, who were going through the same garbage, trying to find something to eat. And the little children were fighting against the dogs to get some garbage to eat. That's how much they were hungry. And my beloved teacher, he was watching and cried. And he said, wherever we are, within a mile of wherever our devotees are, there should be no one hungry. This should be our aspiration. And by that one gesture of compassion, today, people who follow that teaching of his are feeding over 1.5 million children every day in India, in the ghetto schools. One person's compassion, what a difference it could make in the world. Yes, this is yoga of relationship. This is where our real connection is. In cleansing our hearts from our ego and our selfishness and our greed, and really learning how to honor, respect, and love each other through our love for the divine. And this chanting that Gauravani was doing, it is a most powerful yogic process. Divine sound vibration cleanses the heart and awakens our own spiritual essence and empowers us with this love and compassion if we do this chanting with sincerity. Thank you very much. Is there any questions anyone would like to ask? We can maybe 1 or 2 questions if you'd like. What is the time? Do we have time for a question? My special gratitude to Vanamali Panditji. He has picked up this hitchhiker in his nice car and taken me to his house to give me shelter, and has arranged all these beautiful opportunities for me to meet such wonderful people. Thank you, Vanamali, taking such wonderful efforts to serve all these people. And he's a real yogi. He doesn't expect anything in return. He just wants to serve. He loves to serve. Yes?
Thank you for your wonderful talk.
I don't think it was wonderful, but thank you for your graciousness.
I just was wondering, we may know theoretically that God loves us, we may think that, but how can we actually know it with our heart? Like really understand it, really feel that deeply, going from our head to our heart, actually understand that. Maybe you could.
We could learn to do that by being like you. We may know that a certain food is nutritious, or a certain medicine can cure our sickness. So that's important. We have to know it first. But knowing it only has use when we eat it. So there's Gyan and there's Vigyan. There's theoretical knowledge, and there's experience, realization. It's like if you have a map, you have to know where you're going and how to get there. But they can't just sit home and think that's enough. You actually have to get up and go. So similarly, great teachers have given us the theory, the concept of what we really can aspire for and achieve in life. But there's also a roadmap of how to get there. By applying these teachings to our life with sincerity and honesty, we gain direct experience. There's a beautiful verse in Gita, Ragad Vaishava Muktaishtu Vishayan Indrayaishcharan Atma Vashaya Vidhe Atma Prasadam Arigachati. By understanding the truth properly, in the company of people who are really aspiring for the truth, or people who achieve the truth. And by applying these principles to our life, we can access grace. And that grace that is within us and all around us can empower us to overcome all obstacles and actually have direct perception. There are so many frequencies for the radio. If you tune into a particular frequency, you access that. There is news stations, there is sports stations, there is soap opera stations, there's comedy stations. There may be a station with Swami speaking. Many stations. What you tune into is what you're going to access. Similarly, there are so many frequencies all around us. There's anger, there's envy, there's greed, there's piety, there's selfishness, there's selflessness. There's so many frequencies all around us, within and without. Spirituality, the rituals, the meditations, the prayers, the mantras, these are all meant actually for the purpose of tuning into the divine frequency that is within us and all around us and accessing that and becoming purified, enlightened by that. Yes, we have to forgive ourselves if we really want to forgive others. And learn and grow and always be striving to do better. And at the same time, tune in. That's what this kirtan is. It's tuning into a divine frequency to connect us to that beauty that is within each of our hearts. As parts of God, we are all infinitely beautiful. We are all infinitely loving. We are all infinitely compassionate, and nothing in the world can possibly change that. Nothing we do could ever change that. It could cover that, but not change it. And if we are sincere, through yoga, through real spiritual path, we can uncover that and awaken that love. In our yoga, it's called Bhakti Yoga. It's for that purpose, to uncover the love that is within us. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Very enlightening speech. One of the major questions I actually have comes from other questions and other talks I've listened to from varying philosophies and talks. And many of them have, of course, you have the big religions. Perhaps we talk about Christianity or Islam or Judaism. Many of which I've read some of their books as well. I've taken my time to read the Quran or the Bible, and I've read the Gita as well. When you listen to some talks, what has been your response to many who say the existence of the divine is not necessary, or it's not necessary to find a God, or in the life we live these days, there is no point for a God. What has been your response to this?
Sometimes I was very inclined to think that way too. Because look in the world today. Not only today, but throughout history. Christians killing Jews, Muslims killing Jews, Christians killing Christians, and Muslims killing each other, Hindus and Buddhists killing each other, Buddhists and Christians killing each other, Sikhs and Hindus killing each other, Muslims and Hindus killing each other. Yes, isn't that very much a part of history? And it's very much going on today. Protestants and Catholics killing each other. Why, if there's one God who's a God of love, why does religion in his name divide us and cause us to hate each other? Does it make sense? If we seek the essence of those great spiritual paths, we find the unity. We find the really what it means to be a Hindu or a Muslim or a Jew or a Jain or a Buddhist or a Christian or Zoroastrian or whatever we may be, to transform our character, to be an instrument of love and compassion. The Bible says you can judge a tree by its fruit. Are we actually following our religion? The test is, are we meek and humble? Are we forgiving? Are we unselfish? That's the essence of every religion, to develop that character. So yes, from a spiritual perspective of our traditions, without the concept of the divine, we could be good people, we could be pious people, we could be charitable people. But to actually access that ecstatic divine love within our hearts and be instruments of that love, for that to connect to the divine and understand the essence that is required. So we could be very, very good people to a certain extent, but to understand the eternal nature and the eternal love within us, a path that brings us to the divine is necessary. But that path should be inclusive rather than egoistic. Does that answer your question? Because the conflict between so-called spiritual paths is not based on religion. It's based on arrogance, insecurity, and envy. And we take those qualities and we try to empower them and facilitate them in the name of God. That's very dangerous. Humility and gratitude are foundational qualities in all the great spiritual teachings. In my tradition, there's a beautiful verse that is considered so essential if we want to really access the divine. Whether we are professors, or politicians, or farmers, or businessmen, or financiers, or mothers, or fathers, or students, or swamis, if we apply this principle, we can access the divine. Trinadapi sunichena taror iba sehishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. To strive to be humble like the grass, tolerant and forgiving like a tree, eager to offer all respect to others and not to demand or expect respect for oneself. When we really want these qualities, when we strive for them, then when we chant the name of God, when we pray to God, we will directly access and experience the beauty of the divinity within ourselves and be empowered by that. Thank you very, very much. It's really an honor to be among all of you here at the University of Massachusetts.